Here are 12 things that if you're not careful will ruin your watch. Number 1, never operate the crown while the watch is on your wrist. It can be very tempting to either wind the watch's movement or set the time while the watch is on your wrist. Never ever do this. Always take the watch off your wrist first before setting the time, setting the date, etc. And here's why. If you operate the crown while the watch is on your wrist, it puts unnecessary pressure on the crown's stem as well as on the gears of the movement. Bad idea, and you're just asking for trouble. Number 2, not understanding the water resistance rating on your watch. I sound like a bit of a broken record because this is something that I've discussed many times before, including making a separate video about understanding the water resistance of your timepiece. If the watch has 30 meters of water resistance, it doesn't mean that you can just go ahead, start swimming with the watch and go 30 meters under the surface of the water. 30 meters of water resistance is the bare minimum water resistance. It's pretty much zero. If you have 30 meters, don't go swimming. If you have 50 meters of water resistance, you could probably get away with some light swimming. I personally wouldn't go swimming with any watch that has less than 100 meters of water resistance and that has a screw-down crown. But that's just my preference. Do your own research, but definitely don't go swimming with the watch that is not meant for swimming. Number 3, from time to time you have to check water resistance in your watch. Just because your diver watch has 200 meters of water resistance, it doesn't mean that it will always have 200 meters of water resistance. Gaskets wear out, the case backs get loose, crystals get loose. You have to make sure that the watch is still water resistant. For example, me personally, I have my vacation watch, my Omega Seamaster. It's a vintage watch. So what I do once in a while, I check water resistance. You can do this by bringing the watch to pretty much any watch dealer. They would have a special machine to check, or even your watchmaker. Just ask them to check it for you. Usually it's free. Maybe you give them like a Starbucks gift card or 10 bucks or whatever. That's what I do. I check the water resistance on all of my diver watches, especially the watches that I plan to go swimming with, just in case, and I recommend you do the same. Number 4, you must service the watch. Now, I can't believe how many times people have told me that they've never serviced their watch or they're not planning to service the watch for 15 years or 20 years. Some vintage watch collectors wear it like a badge of honor on their chest. Oh, this Rolex from 1970s has never been tested and it's only 5 or 10 seconds off. Well, that's a bad idea. It's nothing to be proud of. Yes, the Rolex movement is very good and almost bulletproof, but it still needs servicing. And guess what? If you did service it, it will probably be 1 second off per day. So please service your watches and account in the budget of your watch collecting journey for the servicing costs. The worst thing you can do to the watch, or one of the worst things you can do to the watch, is not servicing it. Number 5, don't change the date in the danger zone. Now this one is sort of a common knowledge fact. Most watch enthusiasts know about this, but I'll repeat it anyways for some of the newer watch collectors. If we were to look at a watch's dial, there is a northern hemisphere and a southern hemisphere. When the hour's hand is in the northern hemisphere, don't change the date. First, set the hour's hand in the southern hemisphere, then you can change the date. If you change the date while the hour's hand is in the northern hemisphere or in the danger zone, you run the risk of stripping some gears and ruining your movement. Number 6, when you feel the hard stop on the hand winding of your movement, you must stop. Not every movement is the same. Some modern automatic movements have what's called a clutch system. So basically what happens as you wind the watch, once the spring is full, the crown simply slips in place and it's not overwinding the watch. However, some of the other movements, like for example the movement in my Omega Speedmaster or the movement in my Nomos Tengomat, both of these movements have a definite hard stop. Once you reach that stop, you must stop winding the movement. My advice would be take your time, do it slowly at first, feel the movement, feel those gears turning. Once you feel quite a bit of resistance, just stop. It's better to underwind the movement at first than overwind it and break it. Number 7, magnetism is your enemy. What happens when the watch gets overly magnetized? It doesn't run very accurately. It messes with the overall beat the accuracy of the watch, and it's just not a good thing for the mechanical movement. If you have a magnet too close to your mechanical movement watch for an extended period of time, you run a very high risk of magnetizing that watch. Now, magnets are not always very apparent. For example, I have a wireless charger for my phone on my nightstand, and that's where I put my watch. Every night, I make sure to place my watch as far away from this wireless charger as possible because it can magnetize the watch. Or to give you another example, my iPad here has a magnetic case, and I always try to avoid putting my watch close to this case because once again, it will get magnetized. The same thing with the laptop, the same thing with computers, etc., etc., etc. So just be wary of magnetism around you and don't put your watch too close to magnetic fields. Number 8, don't regulate your watch with a metal screwdriver. This one is very personal. I made this mistake in the past. I tried to adjust the accuracy of one of my vintage watches, and instead of using a proper tool, which would be a wooden stick or a wooden toothpick, I used a metal screwdriver, which messed with the hairspring, and basically I ruined the movement in this watch. When you adjust an accuracy in the watch, which is very common, especially in the more affordable timepieces, always use wooden tools instead of using metal ones. Number 9, you can still damage your sapphire crystal. Yes, sapphire crystals are very scratch resistant, but they still can be scratched. But what's more likely to happen than the scratches on your crystal, you could scratch off the AR coating off of your crystal. Sometimes AR coating is applied under the crystal, which is usually in more high-end watches, but a lot of the times the AR coating is actually applied on top of the crystal. So what can happen over time if you're not careful, if you keep placing your watch crystal down on the table, you can scratch off the AR coating off of your crystal. It's gonna look awful, and then you'd probably need to replace the crystal. So even though sapphire crystals themselves are very scratch resistant, AR coating on sapphire crystals isn't. So just be careful with that. Number 10, running your chronograph movement all the time. Now this doesn't apply to all chronograph movements. It only applies to movements that have lateral clutch architecture. So for example, my Omega Speedmaster has a lateral clutch system, and I should not be running my chronograph all the time. It's okay to run it once in a while as it's intended to be run, but not all the time, because then I wear down the movement quicker. It might need more repairs, more servicing. Is just not a good idea. If you have a vertical clutch system, like for example a new Rolex Daytona does, then you can run the chronograph movement all the time without any danger to the movement. So just be aware of what type of chronograph movement you have in your watch and whether it's a good idea or not a good idea to run it all the time. Number 11, resetting your chronograph from midway down the dial. Now this doesn't apply once again to all chronograph watches. Some of the modern chronograph watches have a pretty strong pinion, so it's not going to be a problem. But if you have a used watch, if you have a vintage chronograph watch, avoid resetting the chronograph from halfway point. The best way to reset the chronograph is 15 seconds, 10 seconds out from the 0 o'clock position. I usually try to do it within 10 seconds, so it's either at a 50-second mark or at a 10-second mark. Resetting from this position puts a lot less stress and pressure on the pinion. Now, if I were to reset the chronograph from, let's say, 25, 30, or 40 seconds position, then it puts a lot more pressure on that snap, and it can, in fact, snap off your pinion. I've seen it happen, especially with vintage watches. And number 12, not all sports watches are made for all sporting activities equally. Some sporting activities just put too much unnecessary pressure on mechanical movements, and it's just not recommended to wear your watch while doing these activities. For example, playing tennis or playing golf just puts way too much pressure, too many G's on your watch, and it can in fact throw the balance off on the watch, and it can break your movement. I would not wear my expensive timepieces doing these activities just in case, even though they're probably tough enough to take it. But why risk it? Just because you see your favorite tennis or golf star wearing their Rolex and they're fine, doesn't mean that you should. Because remember, those guys have a lot more money than us. They can afford to mess up 1 or 2 watches. If I were to mess up my Rolex, I'd be pretty upset. Thanks for watching this video all the way until the end. Give it a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. We release new videos every week. And leave a comment in the comment section below. Let me know what some of the other things that could ruin your watch I have left out from this list. We always enjoy reading your comments, plus we might learn a thing or two. In the description of this video, there will be a couple of links. Check those out if you're curious. Thanks for watching this one, and we'll see you next time.